T-minus 17 seconds and counting. 15, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, start, 2, 1, booster ignition, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery, returning to the space station, paving the way for future missions beyond.
I went to university as a mechanical engineer and took a job out of university with a space company. In all honesty, not because it was a space company, but because it was about a mile from the beach, and I thought that would be a great way to start my career. And but in that job, I met a few astronauts and got to know them because our customer was NASA, and then I went to another space company and again worked with more astronauts and sort of realized that being an astronaut is a job, and these are real people that just have a great job. And it occurred to me that maybe my CV was good enough to send an application in, and I just sent my application in, and I got very, very fortunate and got selected.
Did you go through that process, as I'm sure everybody does who ends up wanting to become an astronaut, and I'm sure there are loads of people in this room who would like to be, of going, they're never going to pick somebody like me. I mean, it's got to be, they're all superheroes. They're, you know.
I sent my application in because why wouldn't you? Everybody should send their application in. You know, there are two types of people in the world, I think. You will do anything to go into space, or you'll do anything not to go into space. And so I'm in that first half, and it's like buying a lottery ticket, and you send it in, and you put it in your back pocket, and frankly, you forget about it most of your life. And then one day that phone rings, and they ask if you want to come and interview for the astronaut job, and your whole life changes. So
the career paths that could potentially lead you actually to do both of your jobs. You have very specific career paths. What about, maybe Andrea, I'll start with you, the other ways that people can end up doing what you do?
So there's a lot of different ways. You don't have to do anything specific. You can do any type of engineering or any type of science. As I said, I did mechatronics, and then I was a mining engineer. That is me in the oranges. I wore that every day out at the mines, underground, above ground. And you could also do medicine if you wanted to be a flight engineer, a space doctor. You could do law if you wanted to be a space lawyer. You can be an exercise
I'm sorry, I'm
specialist.
stopping you there. Space lawyer?
Space lawyer.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah. It's a real thing, yeah.
It's not, you see, I'm immediately in my head, all I'm thinking of is little gavels and a judge with a weightless gavel going down, because I'm presuming this is to do with because, you know, law in space is still a relatively, you know, uncharted area.
Yeah, so you can do things like with the Outer Space Treaty, or a lot of things. Also, space insurance is a thing as well, which is a lot of the things that are related to space law like that too.
And presumably stuff like, because it's kind of sort of peripherally your area as well, you know, mining, because it's going to be one of the big future things happening in spaceflight in the next 20, 30, 40 years is mining.
Maybe a few more years after that. But
maybe a few more years after that? Am I underestimating?
The metallurgy's not quite there yet. But
I'm an optimist. Okay. And Dan, you have a specific path to becoming an astronaut, but you know, what other ways can people do that?
Well, so for the NASA program in America, there are requirements now that you have to have a bachelorate college degree in science, maths, or engineering. So we've had a lot of applications and to be an astronaut, and unfortunately they don't have they have an economics degree, and they're very smart, fabulous people, but for whatever reason, right now we have that requirement. I would think that would change, but right now that's the requirement. But given that basis in a career, then they could, as Andrea said, we get a lot of doctors, a lot of medical people, because not that we need doctors in space, but being a doctor has a lot of skills that we like for space flyers, like calm under pressure and following the procedure and methodology and communication. So medicine, scientists, lots of laboratory scientists, lots of pilots, lots of military pilots, because again, same kind of skill set that we're looking for.
Okay. It's one of those things, I suppose, that kind of ties into this quite nicely, which is the idea of basic training and what you guys then have to go through once you've been accepted. That's the beginning of a very long road, right?
For astronauts, yes. We go through a period of a couple years of, we call it basic training, or in NASA parlance, we call it ASCAN training, astronaut candidacy, so we're called ASCANs. And so during ASCANs...
I'm sorry?
Yeah, we're called astronaut candidates because after we've been accepted, but before we're qualified for flight.
Okay.
So
Just checking.
Yeah, we didn't name ourselves Ask Hands. The older astronauts call us Ask Hands. So
I'm sure they did.
I don't know where that came from, but anyway, think of it as basic training because there's a lot of basic knowledge we need to know basically about how the space station works and how mission control works and how the spacesuits work. And for engineers like me, that's not too difficult because it's basically how a big machine works. And so that was not the difficult part for me. Now that we fly on the International Space Station, we need to speak Russian because our partners we have many Russian partners, and so, and we have to fly in the Soyuz right now, so we have to learn to speak Russian. That was the hardest thing for me, is learning how to speak Russian. But the learning how the stuff works, that was kind of fun because they're cool machines.
And does it stick, or is Russian one of those things whereby once you realize you might not need to
Wait,
use it
let
again?
me do a test. Понимаешь еще по-русски?
Очень плохо. Я говорю очень плохо. And so I speak
not
Russian
mine.
very poorly. Thank you. My problem now is I live in Japan, and so I think people's brains are either your native language and then a small part of the other language. And so now I have Russian words in there that I don't want in there anymore because I want to fill Japanese words in there. But every once in a while, Russian words come out in Japan, and
are there any native Russian speakers here who could verify anything they just said, or were they just making noises? No, were they? That sounded okay. Okay, that's fine.
Right,
Just double check. Okay. And in terms of, sorry, the thought has occurred to me, Andrea, I haven't really explained to people what it is exactly that you do, because you are the ground part of the operations when it comes to the ISS. Just maybe really briefly tell people what the day job is.
Yeah, so you know when the astronauts call down to Earth and then you hear somebody talk back. So that's my day job, is talking to astronauts. Yeah. And it has to be in English or in Russian because, as he said, it's English or Russian are the two working languages of the space station. So even if we have an Italian astronaut up there, for example, I'm half Italian, we can't speak in Italian together because it needs to be open communication. And we have a 24/7 interpreter that live interprets amazing technobabble in real time. And so if you don't understand one or the other, you just push a button and you can hear in the language you do understand.
And in terms, again, of the potential paths there are to doing the job that you do, you've taken one very, very specific path. But I mean, in order to become what NASA would call a Capcom and what you guys call Eurocom, there are lots of other ways into it as well, aren't there, to end up being you? Yeah,
so as I said, mostly science or engineering. If you're going to be Capcom, Eurocom, mission control, then it's all science and engineers, but lots of different types of science and engineering. My colleagues and I come from lots and lots of different backgrounds. To do those positions, and there's lots and lots of positions in mission control as well. There's a lot more than you would think.
Okay, there's lots of cool videos to see and lots of cool slides as well. I did quite like this one here, which is the single thruster launch. I mean, it's about 2.5 years worth of training before you get to the point where you're actually doing the job, and then there's the kind of post-flight stuff as well. It's at least a bare minimum of what we're talking 3.5 years. Yeah,
so in my case, I went through ASCAN training for about 2 years, and then I waited patiently at my office and my desk for my boss to call to offer me a flight, and that took a couple years.
Is that the longest period of your life? Because you're trained and
you're ready to go.
You're just going, come on, ring today.
So that's a tough. And watching your other crewmates, your other colleagues get assigned, but. Right now, when we fly in the space station is very complicated, plus the people that live on the space station have to be both the flight crew and the plumber and the electrician and the IT guy, and so there's a lot to learn. Right now, it's about 3 to 3.5 years of training between getting assigned and getting your flight to the space station. So it's a long time, lots of training, lots to learn.
And in terms of your career with NASA up until now, just give us an overview of what that's involved, of your trips to the ISS, and just a kind of arc of that.
So I'm a retired astronaut, so I retired from NASA about 5 years ago. But in my 16-year career at NASA, I was selected, and then I got my first flight about 5 years into my career. That was a space shuttle flight that consumed about a year's worth of my time. Then I came back and was offered a space station flight, so that was the next 5 years, was training for that, and then a 4-month stay on the space station. And then after that, it was coming back and being a more senior astronaut, considering whether I wanted to get in line for another flight or not. And my family was young, and it's that 3-year period of training is very difficult on families because we're back and forth to Russia, to Japan. So it was our family decision to retire from NASA and find the next best thing to do.
Okay. Tell me about spacewalks, because for a lot of people looking at these things as they happen, there are exciting moments in any kind of a space event. There's takeoff, there's landing. There's usually the middle bit always seems like everything goes to clockwork. I will talk to you about that in a minute because it doesn't always work that way. But spacewalks are obviously something that look incredibly exciting.
They are. Either there's a planned spacewalk, meaning you have to go outside because you're constructing the space station in my case, and there's some planned activities outside, or something goes wrong outside and then you have to go out and fix something. I've had the pleasure of doing 6 spacewalks in my career. Spacewalks, they take about 6 or 8 hours, but it's about 3 days of in total preparation. You have to get the suit ready, and then like a scuba diver, you have to get all the nitrogen out of your blood because we operate at a very low pressure in the spacesuit. And so like a diver coming to the surface, you don't want that nitrogen coming out into your joints and your body. So there's a 18-hour process of breathing oxygen, reducing the pressure, doing this whole thing just to get your body ready. And then you get in the suit and you close it all up and you turn a few switches and then you open the door. I'm simplifying. Mm-hmm. And then you open the door and you come out and it's fantastic. You're holding onto the space station. You're going 17,000 miles an hour and you look down at your feet. You can see your feet, but then 250 miles below your feet, there goes the coast of England, or here comes South Africa. It's an amazing thing. However, I say most of the time though, when we're out there, we are focused on what we're doing. We have to memorize what we're doing because we don't have a booklet with us. And so we have Capcoms or Eurocoms or EVA specialists helping us tell us what to do, but we have to have the whole spacewalk memorized so we know where to go next, what our partner's doing. So we're very busy outside, and only when we come back inside do we realize both the pleasure of the experience we had and the danger that we experienced and that we survived.
Okay. I'm going to ask Andrea about your day job, because we do have some pictures of what it looks like, about your work location and about, so I know there's no such thing as an average day in work, but on a relatively average day in work, what does that involve for you?
Yeah, so Common Console, we have 3 shifts per day. So it's a morning, afternoon, and night shift, which in Europe is great because it's the same. The space station operates on GMT, so we're about the same time as all the action on the space station. In America, like they're always operating in the middle of the night for the main sort of morning portion. So sorry for you guys.
It's tough.
And so we will come on and I'll talk to European flight director and to my counterparts in Scuba and Moscow and Houston and Huntsville, and just set up the day. And then we start with a crew call down, which is at the same time more or less every day around 7:30. And we have like an all-hands tag up with all the astronauts and all the mission control centers. And then you go straight into this 12-hour packed back-to-back science day with almost no gaps. And then you have this like tag up in the evening as well, just another 20 minutes, all hands to all mission control. And then we leave the astronauts alone and don't talk to them after that for the evening. And I mean, if you guys want, of course, you can always call us, but we won't call you.
I'm interested in this as well, particularly because this shows that's the day job, but this is Eurocom. So these are different sites around the world. Explain to us maybe why and how they integrate together.
Yeah, so there's not just Houston like the movies. There are 5 mission control centers for the International Space Station. So you've got Houston does the mission control side for the American segment. Huntsville does all of the American payloads, all of the science experiments for the American laboratory. Scuba does all the science experiments for the Japanese laboratory. In Munich, it's actually Oberpfaffenhofen, but nobody wanted to say that, so Munich. We do all the experiments for the European Space Station. And of course, like Moscow's actually a really big center, and they have all the mission control and all of the science control and everything, and like attitude control and thrusters and emergency and docking and visiting vehicles and everything. Their center is really amazing. I've been there a few times. Also, they just have like flown spacecraft just lying around in the car park from like the moon, and it's super cool. Anyway, in Europe also we have not just Oberpfaffenhofen, we actually also have like 7 science control centers. So instead of being in one location, we have 7 small different locations in different countries, because Europe. So.
And explain to me, does it ever get confusing? Because obviously you do have all of these different locations dealing with different aspects of the ISS. It must be complex enough to get all of those to work in harmony.
No, so the person that talks back, as you can see, has a name. So we just change name depending on our geography. That's why I'm Eurocom, not Capcom, but same position. Depending like which lab they're working in. If they're working in the Japanese lab, they're going to call JCOM. If they're working in the European lab, they call Eurocom. So they know which one they call depending on which place in the space station they're working on. And in case the wrong, if they say Munich instead of scuba, then the right person will answer back anyway.
And just one more really complex thing, just for me. Explain this. This is the control center and all of these desks and here and who's doing what and where. Just maybe really briefly.
Yeah, so this is Uwe Pfaffenhofen. This is Munich, the Columbus Control Center. So you've got the flight director desk, you've got the Eurocom desk on the left, you've got the planners, you've got the people that are responsible for where things are on the space station. We have a lot of things, so there's a full-time position just to know where everything is. And there's the one on the left is... actually, the two on the left got combined now, so that person has a lot of responsibility because they do all the data and all the management of all the comms and all the systems of the Columbus Science Laboratory as well. So, and then the science guys are out in different control centers, as I
You
said.
think you have a lot of screens at work? Just genuinely try and figure out how you would deal with all of the information coming through on all of these. I'm going to show you this right now. Just again, we had this added in for everybody who wants to have a look at a spacewalk video and what it actually looks like. This is a really brief look at that. And that's from Russia Today. That's one of the Russian cosmonauts. But I know you say you're focused, and you do. You have to be because you're just there for work right. While you're out there. But even my eye is immediately being dragged to
it's hard.
the far right.
It's hard to, yeah. Well, it's not hard to concentrate because you're really focused on we say that astronauts are more afraid of screwing up than blowing up. And that's absolutely true. And so, you know, when most of the space talks I've done, we're what's called in the critical path. We have to get our task done for the next module to come up for the space station assembly to continue. So we're really focused on what we're doing. But as you can see from out there, well, first of all, there's the beauty of the Earth below and sort of the unbelievable environment that we're in. But you can also see there's stuff sticking around. It's a sort of a minefield, but there's lots of things to trip up on. There's lots of things to mess up. And so if you pull on the wrong cable or you kick a wrong antenna, you can really mess things up. So we're really concentrating on where our body is, where the next place you're going to grab is, where you're going to put your tether, where you're going to stow the next part that you're going to use. So the choreography, your mind is really focusing on everything in your control and in your periphery so that you don't mess something up.
Okay. Dan, in terms of your total amount of flights and in terms of how many times you've been up there, how many?
I've had two total missions, although I get to wear 3 patches. So let me explain this. So I had one mission, the first mission called UF1, that was for 2 weeks in 2001. And then I went to the space station, but my ride up to the space station was part of the second patch there, that's called STS-120 on Discovery. They took me to the space station, and then I transferred over and became a crew member on the space station. That's the third patch, my expedition. That was my 4-month stay.
They just dropped you off like a taxi.
That was planned and everything,
yeah,
right?
Okay.
Not joking around. And then the space shuttle Atlantis came and picked me up, and that's the last patch that's there. So I got to ride 3 different space shuttles on 2 different missions, and be part of really 4 crews during my time.
I'm going to give you another small childhood admission, which has just come back to me now as a result of seeing. You see, Dan obviously wears the jacket, and in case you can't see it from the very back, he does his mission patches, proper ones, because he's allowed, because he was on those missions. When I was about, I think I was 10, 11 years old, I got a denim jacket. And there was a shop in Dublin at the time, I don't know if anybody remembers it, on Capel Street that used to sell mission patches. So I collect anything I could get my hands on. They were mostly Apollo era, they were older ones, but they had some space shuttle ones as well. And I took it upon myself to ask my mother to sew them all the way down here, and here, and here, and here. And I used to go out in public dressed like that as a kind of 11, 12-year-old kid, and yet here still I am today. Tell me about, Andrea, about the number. I mean, the number of missions you've been involved in is obviously a far more complicated number than that.
Yes, so kind of all of them. I mean, get specific mission patches, of course, for a jacket, but
Why don't you deserve mission patches too? That should
No, I do have a lot. I do have a lot on my wall, actually, and crew members are pretty cool, and they tend to like give us a lot of presents and stuff. So my wall at work in the office looks pretty cool. Yeah, so a lot of missions. We have what we call pretty regular missions now. So now that the shuttle finished in 2011, since then it's been pretty clockwork. So you have increments that last for about 3 months each, and then you have 3 astronauts that transfer over to the next increment when their crewmates come down in the Soyuz, and then the next 3 come up, and then like that. So that's why all the astronauts have 2 mission patches for their increments as well. And actually the last mission patch from your slide was a really cool one, because that was the mission that also installed the Columbus Science Laboratory, which is, thanks to that, we have a giant European human spaceflight program since, which is pretty awesome.
For both of you, and I know you probably get these questions all the time, but I'm going to ask anyway, most memorable moments so far from your careers, and the one I want to ask, which is those moments when there was a problem, when something, because to those of us who look at this from the outside, it does look like everything just goes up like clockwork all the time. This happens, everybody, almost as if it's, like a bus route. But there are obviously moments where you go, wow, okay, how are we going to deal with this? Maybe, Dan, both of those feel memorable, and then problems.
So let's see. I have a few memorable moments, but they're really only, from a work point of view, like assembling the space station, they're mostly technical, and there was one day when we actually got 3 days worth of work done in an afternoon, and it was a great feeling. And so we
got to kick back for 2 days.
Yeah, we did nothing. Yeah.
You did
got a little vacation. Yeah. And then during a spacewalk, there's a moment when we were trying to reconfigure the whole cooling system, and I threw the valve, and I could feel the coolant flowing through, which meant that the last 2 spacewalks were all successful. So they're very technical. The most challenging time was the shuttle mission that brought me up to the space station. One of our jobs was to move a big part of the space station, and we had to fold and then redeploy a solar panel, one of these huge solar panels, and it broke. We broke a solar panel broke when we were in control of it.
Be careful with the wording.
I'll use the passive voice. So we were in a position where the solar array was not fully extended, not fully down. And so it's in an intermediate position, which is a problem because the whole space station was not analyzed for that condition, and we didn't know if the space shuttle could leave in that condition. So we were in a position where we might have to dump the whole solar array because it was in an undefined situation. And so that was, we had to scrap the whole rest of the flight in terms of the plan and replan to fix this solar panel. It was very dramatic, and we had to learn, we had to do a spacewalk to go out and fix this thing. And now, we had the easy job because we were in space, and we were just asked to implement the fix that they created on the ground. We know that there were people that got very little sleep for that week because they were working around the clock. But the plan came up. We sent a couple spacewalkers out. I got to run the robot arm in a way that we had never intended for it to be run, to get the spacewalker out about 60, 70 feet from the space shuttle and fix the solar array. It was sort of an Apollo 13 moment for the space station, and it was, although no lives are in danger, not to take anything away from Apollo 13, but it was a dramatic engineering moment, and we could feel the tension on the ground, and of course we were worried about how we were going to continue our mission.
Because people might not understand, but I mean, for instance, you say, okay, you might have had to have dumped the solar array, but that in theory is X amount of money, let's not think about it, and a huge amount of people's time, work, effort, and
science. We would have reduced the power on the space station, and by doing so, we would have greatly reduced the amount of science and probably the number of people that we could that could live on the space station. So it would have been a completely program-changing event if we had to do that.
And Andrea, from your end of the experience, your most memorable moment so far, and again, moments when things got a little hairy?
So on a regular day, I mean, there's a lot of memorable moments. On a regular day, we're talking and there's certain points where crew called down and that's pretty standard for different science experiments. And then if there's an unplanned call, that's when it gets really interesting for us in mission control, because astronauts are very smart, and if they can't figure something out and they have a question or a difficulty with something, then you've really got to be on in real time and figure stuff out. So that's always fun. I, however, got my highlight is an unplanned call, because I was working and I was about to sign off shift and go fly to Italy for a bit of a break that weekend, and I got an unplanned call from one of the astronauts, and my brain's like, oh no, what configuration are we in? What could be going wrong right now? And I'm running through that as I'm replying, and then they're like, oh, we hear it's a very special day today. Happy birthday from space. I was like, oh. So that was a cool highlight for me. Nothing to do with anything. And there's things that go wrong. Well, there's a procedure for that, and if there's not, we write one very fast. Yeah.
I want to show, as part of our next section, have a look at this here.
Hi there. I've had a lot of people ask me how I wash my hair in space, and I thought I'd show you how I do it. Let's see. To get started, these are the things I need. A bag of warm water, a little no-rinse shampoo, towel, and my comb. What I like to do is start by just putting some hot water, squirting it onto my scalp, and I have a mirror here so I can kind of watch what I'm doing. Sometimes the water gets away from you, and you try and catch as much as you can. Then I just work the water up through to the ends of my hair. Then I take my no-rinse shampoo and squirt it also on the scalp, just a little bit, and rub it in. Again, kind of working it out to the ends. And sometimes I'll actually take my comb to help work it all the way to the ends. And I like to take my towel while I have the shampoo in there and just kind of work it. Because without standing under running water, you kind of need to use the towel a little bit to help get some of the dirt out. I like to follow that by a little more water. It's called no-rinse shampoo, but I think it's best if you use a little water with it. It actually feels kind of squeaky clean right now. Now I'll take the dry part of my towel. We use towels for quite a while here, since we have limited supplies. We use them wisely. There, I think that's pretty good. And now as my hair dries, as the water evaporates from my hair, it will become humidity in the air, and then our air conditioning system will collect that into condensate, and it won't be long, and our water processing system will turn that into drinking water. At the end, I just do one final comb through to make sure there are no snarls and snags. And while it dries, I like to let it stay free. I don't put it back in a ponytail while it's drying. And that is how I wash my hair in space on the International Space Station.
That does deserve a round of applause. That's super. That's absolutely just fascinating. One of my thoughts always whenever I see videos like that happen, and I know it's never really a problem, is water and globules of water. Do you not end up finding them everywhere? Because obviously, zero gravity and water aren't friends.
Right. Well, they don't float around. They do float around, but then they'll find a wall or a surface. So that's exactly right. And even when Karen was washing her hair there, you could see the water sort of escaping, and then you just hope that it's going to find someplace benign and then evaporate. I used to wash my hair at a different location, and I would put float a towel above me, because even just to do this, you would get a spray of water, and you just didn't want the whole module to get moist. So I would create a little tent of towels just to catch the water.
Did you ever cut your hair on the ISS?
You got it. So I lived on there for 4 months, and so your hair grows, and your toenails grow, and everything. It's just like here on Earth. And so, yeah, I had to cut my hair a couple times on the ISS.
How? Because obviously you've got the hair, there's an awful, and then that just ends up disappearing somewhere.
Right.
Is there some space helmet you can wear while you're doing it?
So,
I presume no is the answer.
Yeah, right. Well, if you were just to take clippers and cut your hair, right, all those little pieces of hair would float around, and you'd be the least popular guy on the space station for a long time.
Yeah.
And so we have special cutters, clippers, and they've made a special adapter that goes right to the vacuum cleaner. And so you turn the vacuum cleaner on, and as you cut your hair, the hair gets sucked up into the vacuum cleaner unless you have very thick hair like mine, and then and you don't realize it, and the tube to the vacuum cleaner gets clogged up. And then I was the least popular guy on the space station. And no kidding, I spent an afternoon cleaning up the brand new module that we had just brought up, and that I had dirtied with all my little pieces of hair. So.
Oh, no. I want to have a look at this. This is part of the daily life on the International Space Station thing. This is your timetable. This is maybe both of you can just walk us through what on earth is going on there.
So the morning and the evening meetings that I mentioned, they're in the blue boxes at the start and the beginning, and then you can see in the middle it's pretty chockers, and then beforehand they've got post-sleep, which is like eating breakfast and, having a flannel shower and just getting ready for the day. And then you can't see it, but there's also pre-sleep at the end, which is sort of eating dinner and just catching up on emails and yeah, sort of before you go to bed. And then in the middle is all of the science day, as I said. And then there's a lot of other info on here. So the top, you've got day and night with the black and white bars. And then you've got these, the time of the space station, which is GMT, as I said. And the orange and the green, that's the satellite coverage. So we don't actually have 24/7 satellite coverage. It's almost always there, but not entirely. So you can see there's a few gaps in the satellite coverage, which is great because that is when we can go to the toilet or get a coffee. So we have no plans on fixing these gaps. They're only every hour and a half or so. And then other activities. So what else? If it's pink text, it's flexible. You can swap it with any other activity. If it's the same color, then it's that sequence of activities. And then down below, this goes for many, many more rows. And then that's all of the related activities on the ground and who does what and the power resources and the data resources. And then you make sure you're not, using up too much power or anything like that. So you're not going to ever interfere with other people's equipment or overload the station or anything like that. And this is integrated together from every single space agency in the world that works on the International Space Station. So this is like the most optimized, amazing thing you'll ever see. And double-click on any of those, and it brings up the procedure of what you have to do for that activity as well.
I'm just looking at you. I hadn't noticed when I saw it initially. Tim Peake's name is on the left.
Yeah, that's Tim's. I was noticing
one of his
the same
missions.
thing.
Yeah.
I took that screenshot during his mission. I thought you guys might like that one.
He doesn't seem like he has a lot to do that day. He seems like
that's an easy day for him. Yeah.
There's not a huge amount going on with him.
Well, there's another thing at the top that you can't see. It's called the task list. So all of those gaps is pull something from the task list and do that. So it's not actual gaps.
I know this is a question. It's actually when I was doing this, somebody asked me, they said, you've got to ask this question. And I kind of went, I think I know what the answer is to this. How do you deal with boredom on the likes of a 4-month mission? I presume the answer is you don't have any spare time to be bored in.
Well, it's not that you don't have the spare time. It's that even with the spare time, you're never bored because there's well, first of all, you're in space. And if you're bored in space, then you really... Your life is not like mine. You should be enjoying every moment you have in space. But I was never for 4 months I never got bored. There was always either something to look out the window or I'd get on email and I would email my friends and let them experience my time in space with me, or I'd make a call and we call it the phone, but it's a computer system. But you can make phone calls, and so of course we talk to our family every day. But it's fun to call your favorite teacher growing up and tell them that where you are, or other friends and wish them happy birthday or something. Give them a special call, and so there was never a time that I was twiddling my thumbs, wishing I could be doing something else because you're in the most fabulous place, floating around in space.
I would imagine there are a few cooler things than getting a phone call from the International Space Station. That's just, I can understand.
The quality is really good. It sounds like you're just calling somebody on a regular phone. There's no time delay.
So when you have to go through the TDRS satellites, there's about a 2 or 3 second delay. And so the very first time, my very first mission, I got on the phone and called my mom. I thought I'd call my mom. And so ring, 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 ring. I hear my mom say hello, and there's about a 3 second delay. I go, Mom, it's me. She goes, hello. click, hangs on. So I learned after that, first of all, to brief her. If there's nobody to answer, just wait. But I also learned that as it's ringing, I go, don't hang up, don't hang up, don't hang up. So the first thing I hear is, don't hang up.
I love that your mother thought you were a crank caller.
I know, yeah.
That's super. Another one of the questions I'm sure people want to ask, and so do I as well, is space food. Tell me about food on board a mission like that.
The food's fantastic. So this is the ESA-provided food, but first of all, the recognition of how important food is to the morale is not lost on NASA or ESA, JAXA. They well understand the morale value of meals and food. And so they make it as delicious as possible. They make it as tailored to individuals as possible. They fly Japanese rice and stuff for the Japanese astronauts. They flew pate I flew with a French astronaut, stuff like that. So a lot of attention is paid to it, and the food is delicious. Russians generally eat a lot of have prepared canned food. The US and Europeans mainly have food that's already prepared in packs, and you just warm it up, and it's already made. I don't know what this...
This is part of the new French food.
Okay, well, French.
The label says food for extreme pleasure by, I think it's Alain Ducasse.
Yeah.
Once you open
Okay,
it,
so is that some sort of, French project whereby they just want to get, pate in space? Or what's how does that work? It's great.
Well, our space food is made in France and in Italy now, so it's super tasty, and we get some top chefs involved in making it too.
I was also interested in bonus food. Tell me what bonus food is.
This is a European-specific program. So in addition to the regular food, which is all carefully got the nutrients calculated and everything, so you can just pick up a tin or a pouch and it's good for that lunchtime. We have a bonus food program in Europe. So the astronauts get to pick their 5 favorite dishes from their home country, and then we'll get a chef from their country, so Heston Blumendahl in Tim Peake's case, for example, and then we'll get them to partner with a space food lab in France or in Italy, and we turn it into real space food. So this is a selection of different ones from some Danish space food, some, I can see some of Tim Peake's there as well. The gingerbread was a general bonus one that we did. Tim Peake had bacon sarnie, sausage sizzle, chicken something.
Was that bacon sarnie made by Heston Blumenthal?
Yeah.
That blows my mind, the idea of Heston Blumenthal creating your space menu for you. This is, and do you know what an Operation Rally is?
No, I thought that might have been a British or a
sounds
something
like it, doesn't
thing,
it?
Yeah. I didn't know what that word meant either.
It's written in Russian underneath, so...
Yeah, but it's phonetic, so it doesn't really help.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
And somebody loves quinoa salad with mackerel. Well, each to their own.
Well, this program happened after I launched, because I didn't have... My bonus food was nowhere near this cool.
What was your bonus food?
Well, bonus food back when I was flying was they would talk to my wife and my parents or my family and ask what my favorite foods were, and then if you could buy it at the store and it wouldn't go bad after 6 months or so, they would wrap it up and fly it. Nothing was made specific for me, so I had a lot of candy and some, what did I have? Some chocolate bars, and so actually I had, what did I have? Olives, a can of olives that was delicious, and stuffed grape leaves.
Nothing made by Heston Blumenthal.
No,
Things change these days,
unfortunately.
Tell me a little bit about exercise in space, because particularly on missions of your length and obviously on missions going forward into the future, it's vital.
So being in 0G is really easy on your body. Your muscles aren't asked to do much. Your bones aren't asked to do much. And so that's fantastic and it's easy unless you want to come back into gravity. And then, because if you did nothing for months, your bones would be fairly brittle, your muscles would be out of shape, and then you'd be a bowl of jelly on the ground, right? After you got back to Earth. So to keep ourselves in shape and ready for readaptation to gravity, we do a series of exercises. We do both bicycle and running to keep for cardio, and then we do what we call it weightlifting, but of course there's no weight. You push against springs, but that keeps your muscles in shape, and more importantly, it keeps your bones in shape. Your bones regenerate based on how much load or how much force is acting on them. So that's why your leg muscles, that's why your leg bones are so big. That's because they're being asked to take that much more weight, and so we do that to keep our bones in shape, and our muscles in shape. And we exercise 2 hours a day on the space station, 7 days a week. And it's a great break from the workday, but you're also getting yourself ready to go back to Earth.
Is there much of a recovery time when you come back?
So in my case, yes, it's harder to go back to gravity than it is to go to 0G. 0G, most people adapt within about 2 days. But coming back to Earth after months, I felt like I was about 80% back after about 2 days, and about 95% back after about a week. But that last 5%, my body was still figuring gravity out, and my balance was still a little off for months.
Wow. I'm going to show you one more thing. That was from
that's me cutting
that's
my hair.
you cutting your hair
right.
with the special vacuum machine. Have a look at this as well.
Places on the space station is our cupola. It is amazing up here. Windows on all sides. And pretty amazing view. Here, I'll play a little bit with the camera. Improve the view a little bit. What do you see? Yeah, right now we happen to be over ocean, which happens quite a bit. But even the ocean looks different times a day. And I like this view right here where we actually see our spacecraft, the Soyuz, that we came up here in, and a Progress supply vehicle. Our new permanent logistics module. And SPDM, or Dexter. Let's see if you can see it there. I think you can see it. Adjust this camera here. There we go.
Wow. Again, you can applaud that. I think it deserves it. That's incredible.
So that module is called the cupola. We call it a module, but it's a thing with all the windows. And that came up after I launched. So when I lived on the space station, we didn't have a cupola. All our views of Earth were through a window about this big. Mm-hmm. And so when I came back and I talked to my family about should I fly in space again? Is that what we should do? I really wanted to sit in that cupola. And so that was pretty much the driving reason for me to want to go back into space. But we decided that wasn't the right thing. But I would have loved to have gone up and sit in the cupola like that.
You sure it wasn't the right thing?
Sure? Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Next, I'm going to ask about Andrea about Europe's role in the International Space Station. I'm going to ask you about the moon base in a minute. I can feel people's hairs prickling going, moon base. First of all, what Europe does in the ISS these days?
Yeah, so the cupola was actually built by Europe, of course, and we built a lot of the other components of what's called the US segment of the space station. So we built 2 of the nodes. We provided the ATV, we provided Columbus, we provided the PMM, that's where they store the spacesuits in that module. So we provided actually quite a big chunk of the American segment of the station. It's got NASA stickers on it now, but it was European made. The ATV was an amazing vehicle. We did 5 missions as planned, and that brought up about 3 tons of supplies, and it also brought up fuel. So uniquely, it was one of 2 vehicles that can refuel the International Space Station. So now only the Progress can do that from Russia, and it would do then the reboosts as well as the refueling. Because you're dropping down like briefly all the time. So every month or so, you got to like fire up the thrusters and move out so you don't fall to Earth.
And I'm going to show this as well. This immediately starts to look cool. Tell us about the ESA's role in possible preparations for a moon base.
Yep, so this is my office, a building on not the moon base, but the office building on the right is my office. And from my window, I get to see this construction site. I can't show you the pictures except for this is the only public one we're allowed to do at the moment. So we're building a moon training base in preparation for, moon village plans that ESA has, of course. And the building just to the left of it is where the astronauts do rehab when they come back to Earth, the European astronauts. So we're building this 30-metre dome, and it's going to be 2/3 of lunar regolith and about 1/3 of computer equipment and a mini control room there. And it's got going to have 2 habitation modules attached to it as well for crew to be able to live while they're sort of doing moon training for now.
And across the road from your office.
Yeah, I can see it from my window. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay. I'm going to ask you as well about Ireland, because we're here today. Both of you, kind of have certainly you have personal connections with Ireland, but in terms of Ireland and science and Ireland's science connection to the ESA, it's substantial enough these days.
Yeah, so Ireland, of course, is a full member of the European Space Agency, so there's a lot of different collaborations that go on there. That software that you saw with all the giant timeline, that was actually, and the procedure viewer that goes behind it, that was coded by an Irish company. And there were several different science experiments that were sent up by Ireland as well. Over the years, most recently a pretty cool student competition that the winner was able to send their payload into space, and that was organised by Dr. Patton, who's here at the moment. So yeah, and there's potential, of course, for Irish payloads in the future.
Because we tend not to think of ourselves as being involved in space, really, unless you do understand all of the minutiae of that. But we are involved in it all the time.
And we stole a few Irish engineers across the water as well.
Perfectly acceptable. That's fine. This picture I want to show because this has it was taken by you from the space station, and it has great kind of personal significance for you. Tell us why.
Well, first of all, my in-laws live in Ireland, and so for a 120-day mission, I knew I had to come home with pictures of Ireland. Mm-hmm. And so I would used to set my watch every day when we would come over Ireland so that I could sometimes wake up and go take pictures. And I have an incredible number of beautiful pictures of the clouds over Ireland because there's a rare day to get a clear view of Ireland. So on about mission day 112 or so of a 120-day mission, no kidding, I finally got a nice clear day. So this is on the southern coast, that very unusual head is Old Head down near Kinsale. And so the Bandon River goes up there onto the east of there. And then Cork Harbor is over here and goes into Cork. And so I met my wife at the Old Head of Kinsale. I had heard about the great golf course there. I went to visit to golf, and she was the business manager at the golf course, and the weather was miserable outside. But that was okay because the scenery inside was better than the scenery outside. And I got to know her, and we were married about 18 months later. And now we've got 3 kids, and now we come back to Kinsale and visit Granny and Granddad.
That is one of the most romantic pictures I've ever seen. That's the exact location where you met your wife, and you had to wait so long to get that shot in space.
That's right, exactly.
That's fantastic. Yeah. The last maybe Irish question, and I know neither of you have an answer to either of this, but there have been, I looked it up yesterday, there have been people from 40 nations so far who have flown in space in one form or another. Obviously, none of them Irish. Can either of you foresee a day where there'll be an Irish astronaut?
So as a full member of ESA, anytime there is a European astronaut selection, of course, Irish people are eligible to apply. So prepare and get ready with all the training stuff. So the STEM degrees or medicine, and get your diving and do extra stuff on the side and apply. And in the future, hopefully. And
80% of Americans consider themselves Irish. Mm-hmm. And so, in fact, my buddy Scott Kelly, who lived in space for a year, in fact, is in Dublin today, just traveling around as a tourist. So he considers himself Irish-American, at least. And so we've had many Irish-Americans in space. But I would certainly hope as many countries as we can represent in the astronaut corps to experience this, come back to their home countries and share the experience. It will just bring the excitement and the involvement even more. So, of course, I'd hope to have an Irish astronaut.
I love the idea. It could potentially be one of the people in this room today.
Yeah. Go to Mars.
I have a moment of just thinking, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you another video just before we go into what is the last section of what we're talking about here. I am going to ask for questions. If anybody has always wanted to ask a question of either of the guys, then now is the time to think about it. We'll come to you in a couple of minutes. But first off, have a look at this. That's NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations, the wonderfully named NEMO. Tell us about it and about why it's so important to the future of spaceflight and where we're going from here.
Oh, well, I just got back from NEMO 6 days ago, actually. So I was Capcom for this year's NEMO expedition. And by the way, the astronauts can go into space on a mission there, or they can be assigned to an aquanaut astronaut mission underwater, like in NEMO, or they can be assigned to be a cave naut. So this is the different cycles that astronauts can do for a different mission training. And there was actually an Irish aquanaut last year. So that was pretty cool. So living underwater in an underwater pressurized habitat, it's about the closest that you can get to space on Earth, because you've got to suit up properly with your air tanks and everything anytime you want to go outside. You can't just come back to the surface whenever you want because of the nitrogen problem. As you said, you would die, so you would have to, because you're completely saturated after 24 hours. So it's about a 17-hour process to get back up to the surface safely. You can do it a bit faster than that, but then you have to go in a hyperbaric chamber for a while, like ask dive people and Google that. So we do this mission training. So there's a crew that lives underwater, and they have a pretty similar timeline to the space station. They have to execute every day. They go out on EVAs every single day, as you saw in that clip. And it's a pretty ISS-like environment. And the caves one as well, I'll mention that and then get you to jump back to NEMO. But caves is really cool because that's done underground in Sardinia. And last year, for the first time, so we try and get, that's a NASA-run one, and that's a European-run caves experiment, and we try and get astronauts from each agency every year, and we also tried to get China for many years and weren't allowed to. So, but as in NASA kind of said no because of politics, unfortunately. And last year they didn't say yes, but they didn't say no. So for the first time we had a cave naut crew, which had Chinese, Japanese, Russian, European, and American astronauts all together on a mission, and it was amazing.
Dan, you've experienced this.
Yeah, I've not done caves. They started that right when I was leaving, but I'd love to. But I was on the second NEMO expedition, and so yeah, we go underwater. Once you go underwater, once you've gone to 60 feet of depth, then you can't easily come back up. So we were down there for 8 days. It's a great analogy to a space flight in that you've got a ground control team helping you or guiding your day, and then we follow the procedures and the schedule for the day, where there's a commander. So as the aquanauts and astronauts, there's a lot to learn about how to do a mission, but there's also a lot to learn for the ground control, the coordination between the two, and also like procedure writing. How do you convey a procedure? Sort of the nuts and bolts of space flight. So it's really a great tool for all aspects of space flight to sort of a sort of a junior, a training ground for that.
And we also test out real experiments in the NEMO missions that are then going to go to space as well.
And that's just another picture of you.
So that was myself and one of the planners in mission control for NEMO a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, I think actually I didn't realize I had one more. Explain to us what we're looking at here.
That's our dining room table in the habitat. This is off the coast of Florida, and it was put down as a research laboratory at 60 feet of depth of water. And there's another through the far door there. It's called a porch, and so you can enter from in scuba gear up through the floor there, and then you just climb out, and you're in the second module. And then you get out of your suit, take a shower, and then you're into this main module, and then there's some beds behind you. So we're having a meal there, and we eat space food because we can try out these space foods, and we can try that technology. But there's a couple people that are in there just to maintain the habitat that are not strictly part of the mission, although they may have integrated that now. But at that
we
time,
make them do a few experiments, but mostly they have a lot of responsibility.
Yeah,
to have techs already.
Keep the habitat up and operational. But anyway, you had a nice window at your dining room table, and we have significant sized sharks, and we had a big tortoise that would swim by. It was a fantastic, probably a 100-pound grouper that kind of hung out at the.
It's still there.
It's still there. Yeah, a huge grouper. So it's a nice place to sit and look out.
And you don't have to cover the pool where they come back in. So it's called the moon pool, and it just the water calmly sits there because the pressure is the same. So you don't have to do anything for that.
That's genuinely amazing.
when we launch on the shuttle, we're lying on our backs. The seats are oriented so you're lying on your back. And by the time you launch, you've been there for about 3 hours. So you're actually a little uncomfortable, and you've got a parachute on your back. But you're with your crewmates, your friends, so you've been joking around and talking on the mic. And also, you've done this training dozens and dozens of times for launch. So everything feels a little bit familiar. There's a moment about 30 minutes before you launch where you realize, holy cow, this is not the sim. This is the real thing, and you're really going to go. That iconic, mission control announcer that counts down, engine start, blah, blah, blah. You don't hear any of that. So all you're watching is you're watching the computer clock count down, and now you're inside a minute, and you're looking, and you're sure that they're going to come and take you out because they made a mistake, and you're the wrong person in there. But then you go to 31 seconds, you know that that's what's called internal. Now all the computers on the shuttle are under control. And then at 6 seconds, that's when the liquid engines start. And so you can feel the rumble. And you remember that from the sim because they play that audio. But now you can feel the shuttle move because those engines are coming up to full thrust. And then at 0, and again, you're watching the clock. You're remembering what it looks like on TV. But then, boom, it's as if somebody kicks you in the behind, and now you're just everything's shaking like crazy, and you're pushed back in your seat at faster and faster acceleration. So the feeling is I've been here before because we've done it dozens of times. There's a realization like, holy cow, this is the real deal, and it's awesome. It is so much fun. I tell my kids it's scary, but it's scary fun. I mean, it's fun scary, right? It's it's awesome. Trust me. If you ever get a chance, I'd do it. This overview effect. When I went to space and spent months in space, I came home. I would say the biggest change for me is I was able to appreciate our beautiful planet. Trust me, we live on the most beautiful planet of any that we've ever seen in certainly our solar system. And I came back with such pride of citizenship of planet. And I tell people that we all have our associations, our school, our town, our whatever, and if you prioritize those, for me, pride of citizenship of planet went to the top, and I wish I was able to share that with everybody because for that moment at least, I know awful things were going on at the Earth that I was looking at, but I had the perspective where I could just appreciate the beauty and not let the awful things that were going on below me bother me at that moment, and that was a moment of inspiration for me and just a real pride of planet. Thank you.
Do you think if you could, I've always wondered about this, just bottle a little of that feeling and distribute it to everybody around the world, we would be a completely different place?
I don't know if it would be completely different, but I think people would be happier and people would feel more at peace with the place that we live at. And I feel like that's sort of my job. I was given the privilege of going there and experiencing it, and I try to tell people how wonderful it is, and maybe through video and through YouTube and something, appreciate what a beautiful place we live on.
Well, I think the big one, like I said, some moon plans, that's a really big one. We haven't been back for a long time, but establishing a more permanent presence there is a pretty big tech challenge. So, and it's a realistic tech challenge as well, because it's only 3 days away, so you can, go back and forth a bit more easily. So I'm looking forward a lot to that and the challenges that is going to bring as well. But also, I mean, just for now, just enjoying, because actually the ISS, interesting point, is only going to last for another 7 years-ish. So it's not that much longer. So then after that, we'll have a few new things.
Yeah. Well, I'm convinced we're going to go to Mars. I don't know when. I don't know if it'll be in our lifetime, but I'm convinced that we humans, that's what we do. We're going to go to the next place. And so when we go to Mars, it's going to be amazing, but it's going to be really hard. There are not only technical challenges of getting there, but the Mars and Earth are very far away, up to 15 minutes away by light, which means that when I press the button if I'm on Mars and I'm talking to the ground, it's going to take 15 minutes to get there, and then 15 minutes to get back. And so conversations will no longer exist. It will be one way. And so the dynamics, the psychology of being there, being so far away from your home planet, are going to be completely different. And I mean, I think that's one of the big hurdles of going to Mars, is going to be the psychology of being so far away from your home planet will be tough. So, but it's exciting, and I'm pretty convinced we're going to get there.
Yeah, as an amateur, I was one when the last man set foot on the moon. I'm 44 this year. I think if you'd said to anybody in 1974 that this is the last time, probably for the next 60 years, that anybody is going to set foot on the moon, they would have laughed at you. So the idea of all of that starting to happen again and inspiring an entirely new generation of people just seems wonderful. But you're right. I think actually in practical terms, the James Webb Space Telescope is the thing, as a punter, I'm most fascinated about, because I've only recently started wearing glasses I needed for reading now these days, and really I can see, you know, people's eyebrows up the very far end of the room up there, and that's kind of, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the impression I get, the equivalent of change of what we are going to be able to see in terms of deep space using the James Webb Space Telescope. It's kind of exciting, because the best part is you don't really know what's going to happen next, or what you're going to find, or what sort of windows are going to be opened on the universe. So in the very short term, I think that's for me, I just want things to start happening with that the moment it gets up there.
Well, so we're pretty specialized. So when you're working in certain roles, then you really focus on your roles, and everybody at the different space agencies focuses on their roles. That's how you can get hundreds of different programs. I mean, just on the space station, we have about 200 science experiments running all the time, but different. I mean, there's not just me on shift. There's other people on shift as well, of course, and within all the roles, then we cover it together as a big, giant science machine.
Sleep in space is awesome. It is fantastic. So, you know, we sleep in sleeping bags, but the reason we sleep in sleeping bags isn't to keep warm. It's so that we don't float around the space station when we're sleeping. And so, since everything's floating, since we're floating inside the sleeping bag, there's no pressure on your body. You are just sort of floating in your sleeping bag. And because of that, your sleep is great. And I would go to sleep, I'd close my eyes, and 8 hours later, it feels like another second, and I'd open my eyes. And the best part is you're in space when you wake up. But sleep in space is fantastic. I loved sleeping in space. Wow. I guess, let's see. When I was there, so I was not there for the cupola. That would have been my favorite place. But when I was there, there's a place called an airlock. That's where we do spacewalks out of. That's where we keep the spacesuits and all of the equipment that we need for spacewalks. And there's a little area that's a small area, but it's where you go, you and your partner, spacewalk partner, go into, and you close the hatch behind you, because you're going to lose that air. So you want to lose as little air as possible. So it's a very small area, and then you're going to, and then you open the other hatch and go out. That's a really kind of a fun little area. It's small. There's a hatch right outside to space there. It's nice and cool. It's a very cool place, a comfortable place, and it's sort of out of the way of traffic, and so it's a private space. So I slept actually in the airlock for about a month when I was there. It became my little home, and when it got too busy, I moved out. But so the airlock was my favorite part of this place in the space station.
You slept in an airlock. In my head, I'm going, space is on the other side of this door. I'm not going to be able to get a proper night's sleep here.
Well, you're either going to trust the space station, or you're not going to trust the space station.
Okay.
And it was cool to be in the airlock.
It's a bit of both. So the biological science that we do on board the space station, we have several different modules specifically for that. So the one you see, I think, the most often is the really big one, the MSG, Microgravity Sciences glove box with the gloves and the glass pane. But that's not necessarily always for life science. We have specific biology, like in Columbus we have Biolab, for example. So that has like 2 different centrifuges for different experiment containers for biological or for plant samples, and separate glove boxes and things as well. So it can be, anything that is alive,
So, well, and I'll add to that. So one of the reasons we have the space station is we want to understand how humans, or life, and plant life also, are affected by gravity. So since we have this fantastic place that doesn't have apparent gravity, we can do science experiments. It's called a variable. You can change, you can say, do it once with gravity, now without gravity. And we're finding out human bodies or animal bodies act differently with gravity and without gravity in ways we didn't expect. And so there are things that, like eyesight is changing in space. We didn't know why. We're really trying to figure that out why. And stuff like, I'm sorry?
Your eyesight is changing how?
It's degrading in space, okay? And astronauts are coming back with worse eyesight than they started with, okay? And we don't know why, and that's very interesting. But it must be a gravity thing. You take a pill and you get medicine for the pill. Turns out that it's different if your body has gravity or not, the absorption of chemicals. These are interesting things, and we want to know as much as we can so that when we go to Mars, there are very little surprises, a few surprises as possible. So that's why we do life sciences. We're gonna bring people, maybe animals, probably plants, to these long missions, and we're going to have to figure out how it all works.
Yeah.
Why do you not bring animals into the space station, or why do you not build them on the space station?
So the question, sorry, in case you can't hear at the back, is why don't you bring animals onto the space station?
Well, we do.
We had a lot of them. Yeah, I think there's a Wikipedia page just dedicated to animals in space. By the way, the first animals to see the moon were actually tortoises before Apollo. It's pretty cool.
Really?
Zond,
I didn't know that.
Zond 5 mission, Google it as well. So Russia sent tortoises that circumnavigated the moon and came back. So I've stuck my head in the actual capsule that they were in. It's pretty cool. And what else? So yeah, we've had a lot of different animals in space. There's an aquarium in the Japanese module. If you change the light, then the fish rotate and swim as if that way is up, whichever way you put the light. Yeah.
So that's a good Saturday night on the International Space Station. It's
Turn in the light.
go up, fish go down. Fish go up, fish go down. Okay.
I can only speak for NASA selection. ESA, I think, is similar, but I know the NASA selection very well. Basically, the basic criteria is relatively easy. It's a university degree in science, math, engineering, and general good health, I guess. And then you send your application. From there, of the 1,000 applications, they pick out probably the people that have the most successful careers in whatever they're doing, and people that have some interesting life experience. Then they interview about 100 people out of that 18,000, actually, just recently. And then the criteria becomes very difficult because it's really a lot of personality and a lot of, any of those 100 generally will make great astronauts. But when we interview them, we mix with the current astronauts and other NASA employees. And the question that comes up is, can I live with this person for 6 months in a tin can? Can I sit on an airplane going to Russia for 18 hours and not have them drive me crazy? They won't drive me crazy. And so there's a compatibility, there's a teamwork, there's an empathy, there's that kind of person, good humor even in difficult times. That's what you really want. So that's sort of the selection, I would say, criteria. Those are the decisions that get made when we select new astronauts. And then I forgot the second part of the question.
The second part of your question was? After that, yeah.
So physical training is not as rigorous as you might think. We want to be in good shape, and we want to be in good shape because we don't want any kind of medical issues once we get on space. So a lot of the astronauts are, I call them gym rats. They love to hang out in the gym. I was not one of them, but I kept up in pretty good shape. Mentally, we do some training for teamwork and some compatibility, that kind of stuff, leadership training. We do that. That's not really mental training. That's sort of like teamwork training. But mental, I think you come to that job either with it or without it, and they do a pretty good job of scrubbing people for the ability to handle those kind of situations in the basic application process. And you either have that skill, I think, or you don't. So I have an interesting answer to that question. I'm convinced that there's other intelligent life in the universe, and I'm convinced because the numbers demand it, meaning the number of stars and solar systems, galaxies are so immense that I think it's a little pretentious for us to think that we're the only ones that have beaten the odds and have figured out, or have the lucky numbers have aligned, and we have life here. However, on the other hand, those same numbers that, in my mind, demand that other intelligent life exists will also require that we will never see them, interact with them, know about them, just because we're so distant in time and space. So it's a bit of a cop-out, but I believe for sure they're out there, but I believe for sure that that they don't come down in Cary and pick people up and do experiments on them and come back. And so I'm convinced that we'll never know about them, but the sheer numbers out there just demand that there must be something else out there. That's my opinion.
Isn't that enormously frustrating, though? I would tend to side with you on this, in that, you know, the maths suggests that there absolutely has to be, but there's no guarantee. The odds of them being in the same tiny little corner of space we are, and therefore able to communicate with, are so astronomical that ultimately that could become quite frustrating if we end up in an era, as we may, where we may be able to see what we think are some forms of signs of life on exoplanets elsewhere, but there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, I'm not frustrated by it, because, as I tell my kids, there are things that you can change and things you can't change. And if there are things you can't change, then you just, that's the way life goes for me. And so I'm happy that they're out there somewhere, I think. And, but I don't think we'll ever know about them.
Well, the moon is going to be definitely an international collaboration for the Moon Village. I mean, already, as I said, it's a big idea with the European Space Agency, the Chinese Space Agency, the Russian Space Agency. That's already like, 20-something countries that are working together on it, and that work's already happening now. So it's much more international. It's not plant a flag, no offense, but it's going to be more of an actual Moon Village. So I think the world reaction will be pretty positive, because it's pretty awesome, and we're all going to be involved.
Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree that, well, we're going to colonize someplace. Moon's probably that makes the most sense. It's my hope that it pulls more people, more non-space people into, so there's a lot of romance about the Apollo era and how we were, as a humanity, we were pulled into the wonders of going to the moon and walking or doing work on there. And there's a lot of romance about the unity feeling at that time. I would expect that the time when we put humans on on Moon or Mars, that we will have that same interest by people that weren't interested before, and the connection with people that never thought they would have a connection to space. And so I think we would hopefully pull in more people into the endeavor of the exploration than just the science and the spacey folks.
Do you think, and maybe just a final question, that it's something that's been debated for a long time, but that maybe potentially the international spaceflight community needs a grand project like setting up a base on the moon or putting a man on Mars to both galvanize efforts and, more importantly, then to potentially allow the world to find a passion for being beyond the bounds of the Earth that maybe we haven't had for a couple of decades?
Yeah, I think it's important to have really big international and really big engineering projects like that as well. Like the International Space Station is the most amazing thing ever, and there's never been anything like it. And I hope that there is something like it again when it finishes, because everyone was building their own space stations, and then they were like, oh, let's put them together like Lego instead, and it was the best idea ever. And I think honestly, the ISS is above world politics, and whatever happens, we are working together with all the mission controls around the world all the time. We talk to each other every day. We all speak the same nerd language, same acronyms even, and regardless of being from whatever country, we just get things done, keep the astronauts safe, and keep science going, and keep all the space station systems going. And having that sort of big project is so unique, and it would be nice if that was less unique and we had big things like that in the future. And I think that's also, for international diplomacy as well, is a pretty big deal. When you've got those sort of channels, it's pretty nice to be above regular politics.
I think that is where we are going to finish for today. All I can say is thank you very much for coming out on a Saturday afternoon and spending your time with us.
Thank you so much.
And please put your hands together for DanTani and Andrea Boyd.
Thank you.